Good evening and welcome to Live.Work.Thrive. I'm Makayla Birmingham, Scary Mommy executive producer, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's panel. If you are a woman with a child watching right now, you are 3 times more likely to have experienced depression and/or anxiety since the onset of the pandemic. Everything from our jobs, our schools, childcare, and our social networks have been reshaped. Finally, with more vaccine access, there is a light at the tunnel, but for many of us, the challenges will be longstanding. Tonight's conversation is about motherhood and mental health. And I want to start by saying to anyone watching right now who may be feeling helpless, please know that you are not alone. If you need to talk, please reach out to one of the numbers on the screen right now. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the Crisis Text Line, the Postpartum Support International Helpline are all available and have teams that are there to listen with confidential support 24/7, 365 days a year. Coming up, we will meet a mom whose company makes iconic toys many of us have had in our homes or still have. She will share how she led a double life, but finally found a lifeline to move out of a deep state of depression. We will also meet a doctor who leads an innovative program for new and expectant mothers facing mood and anxiety disorders, which have increased at staggering rates. Tonight, we will cover ending the myth of the perfect mother, normalizing conversations about mental health, strategies for safeguarding our mental health, and what to do if you or someone you know has a problem you can't handle alone. Let's meet our panelists. We have tonight with us Melissa Bernstein, who along with her husband Doug co-founded the toy company Melissa and Doug, which has sold billions of dollars worth of toys since its inception. I think it even started off in her garage. Well done, Melissa. Throughout Melissa's remarkable career, she kept her secret lifelong battle with severe depression and anxiety. She reveals her struggles in Lifelines, her first book, which she wrote to help others who are also suffering. Welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
I am so honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Also with us is Dr. Catherine Birndorf, who is a reproductive psychiatrist and also the co-founder and CEO of the Motherhood Center of New York, a treatment center for pregnant and new mothers experiencing mood and anxiety disorders. Dr. Birndorf appears on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and CNN as a mental health expert. Her first book was a New York Times bestseller, and she is also the co-author of What No One Tells You, a guide to your emotions from pregnancy to motherhood, published in 2019. Before we get started, I have a few quick reminders for the audience. You can submit your questions in the comments wherever you are watching, and we may even feature a question later on in the show, so stick around. Join our mailing list so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming virtual events. Visit scarymommy.com/liveworkthrive to sign up and stay in touch because we are still in a pandemic and I know you have no plans. All right. So let's get into tonight's topic. Women are struggling. And it's not just that we are cranky about virtual learning. There is actual data to support that mental health disorders are increasing threefold for women since the start of the pandemic. Dr. Birndorf, let's start with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about what specifically is happening to women right now that could be causing this sharp increase in mental health disorders?
If you have all night, I will begin because I think the list is so long. But one thing that I hear from almost everyone that I know is the sense of isolation and solitude, which while can be good for people and there's time to kind of look inward, it's very disorienting. And for some sort of keeps you more and more into the point where you stop. People are becoming more socially phobic even from going outside. So there's a sense of just kind of involuting, going inward. And that kind of isolation, which can be part of anxiety and depression, is now among the general population. We've all been isolated more or less. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I've found that is contributing to the increased numbers of stress, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. All of that contributes.
It really does get to you, even when you just don't leave the house because you're working from home and doing school from home and all of those things. You realize it when you go to get some milk at the store. You're like, oh, It feels good to get out of the house after a while, right? So Melissa, I want to get into your personal journey in just a second because it's fascinating. But first, let's talk a little bit about the myth of motherhood as bliss. And you touched on this in your book, Lifelines. Why do you think this notion that once you have a baby or a child, you should find joy and rainbows and butterflies and everything? And if you don't, you must be a bad mother.
Mhm. I think there's so many myths that society puts out there that we are supposed to attain. And one of them is the myth that life is perfect. And when you get married, find your partner, have kids, it's going to be all the white picket fence and the beautiful shutters, and your kids are always going to be clean. And I knew from the beginning that that absolutely wasn't the case with me. And I think, buying into that fairy tale can be very, very damaging because it leaves us feeling inadequate and that we are failing in every regard.
Dr. Birndorf, from your perspective, can mothers feel, these feelings of apathy and just, lack of bonding and happiness? And how has society kind of fueled this unfair expectation that, you have a healthy baby, you have it all, now go enjoy it, use a filter on Instagram and we're all good. Why is this a problem?
It's a problem because I think people believe what they see, right? And you can't, the old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, Melissa, I know you'll talk more about it, but like we can all look fairly decent if we brush our hair and get out of our pajamas like I did about an hour ago. And short of that, you have no idea what's going on inside for someone. So when someone puts forward their, looking decent and, and puts out like their best picture on Instagram or on Facebook, or tells you that things are just fine because that's socially what's expected, you believe them. I mean, I don't, because I'm a psychiatrist. I always say you cannot believe, you have to be able, I'm always looking for the subtext and the clues and the kind of sadness in the eye. I mean, but that's what I do for a living. But I'll tell you, generally speaking, we are all inadvertently and unwittingly, for the most part, fooling each other. And not, again, I don't say that intentionally. I don't think any of us are trying to be deceitful, but I mean, in some cases, yes, because of the pain, and there are many things. Melissa will talk more about it, but I'll tell you, no one wants to look. It's I think Scary Mommy, by the way, is like an amazing site and platform to bring realness to what is like motherhood is messy. Motherhood's all about ambivalence. It's all about not knowing. I mean, you didn't know what you were doing when you got into this. It's a developmental stage. It's not something that was just, it's natural, it's blissful, it's easy. I mean, that is just untrue. And we've somehow believed, we continue to believe this, and it's false.
Yeah, no, you're right. The original mom who started Scary Mommy back several years ago started it for that exact reason, because everything she was reading was, a mom making perfect cupcakes and cookies and arts and crafts and all of these things. And she was like, wait a minute, hey, I'm over here and it's not perfect. And like you said, my kids are not clean all the time. And this is hard and this is messy.
Right. And
she found such a community of other moms and other women who were like, yeah, me too. It's hard. Right. So I think that's such a great point. And so just to kind of set the context, I want to play a clip of some of the women from the Motherhood Center who are, this is the organization that Dr. Birndorf has co-founded, where women find help through this wraparound program. They have a day program, they have virtual events. You can visit their site and see all the offerings. But we have a clip that includes some of the women that are receiving services at the center. And they talk a little bit about the myths of the postpartum period and how the pressure to be perfect impacted them. Let's take a look.
I think a myth about postpartum that scares a lot of women and scared me is that if you share the scary thoughts you're having, they're going to take your baby away. But for the majority of people, that's not the case. And a lot of the times you'll share those thoughts, especially in here, and people say, oh yeah, I've thought that too.
I was just, every time I heard him cry, every ounce of my being would shake.
Yeah, I felt like I was bad. It feels like there's these opposites. There's the good mom and the bad mom. And I felt like right off the bat, I was setting my kid up and I was a bad mom. The pressure of being perfect started with just being pregnant.
It doesn't always need to be a certain way. It can just be about the process.
It's fine to ask for help, and it's fine to be mad and sad and miserable.
It's okay to have this, and it's a disease. No matter how strong you are, how much you've overcome, this is a sickness that needs to be properly treated.
Every single entity that comes in contact with a new and expecting mom, we all have to be aware and talking and looking for this because it's the #1 complication affiliated with birth. And it's common, and it's treatable, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
So, Melissa, as a mom of 6 children, tell us, did you experience, these peaks in your depression around the birth of your children? What would a program like this might have meant for you?
Wow, I think it would have been incredible because, and I think when Catherine said, we hide these feelings from the world, I said, you know what? And also often from ourselves, because for me, that facade that I needed to keep, like that perfect image, was so deep that I repressed anything that wasn't that facade. So wouldn't have even known if I had postpartum depression because I already had existential depression. So I think I just denied it all and just fought so hard to put on that perfect front.
Wow. And so, Dr. Birndorf, you mentioned this briefly with respect to, posting photos on Instagram and Facebook to depict, that most perfect moment or the most perfect, second at the vacation where everyone was clean and had just, put on their party clothes. When we talk, you hear so much about the impact of social media on kids and teenagers and about how it's dangerous and about how there are so many associated mental health impacts. What about for grown women? I mean, are there the same risks involved? And should we, as adults, arguably old enough to monitor our own usage, how should we be thinking about these platforms if we're starting to feel not so good after looking at, the feed of all the friends and family that we have on our devices?
Well, I mean, we are not digital natives. I mean, at least Melissa and I aren't. We're similar age, right? You may be, but so I'm not that great on social media. I can only do a few things. So I think the kids can go down they can go to some really intricate places and find more and more of whatever it is they're looking for that may be making them feel bad. I mean, if we just take Facebook and Instagram, which I know how to operate, I look at it. I don't know that I believe what I see. I think I've been in the business too long that whenever I see something looking perfect, I'm skeptical. But I'm an unusual person. I think that most people look and they see it and they think, I have to compare myself to that. I'm not doing that. I wasn't on vacation there. I mean, vacations kind of get me because, I'm stuck in one of my daughter's rooms right now. And I'm like, could I get out of here? So like when I see the beautiful vacation pictures, I think, oh, I'd love to be there. And I start to feel like, could I do that? Why can't I? Oh my gosh, I'm working all the time. That's not fun. You start to compare yourself and you start to think, boy, my life is not great. I thought it was decent, or maybe I didn't think it was so decent and now it's worse, right? So we all get caught in this spiral of comparisons. There's natural competitiveness. There's a sense that everyone's doing it better, that I don't know how. I'm deficient. I'm incompetent. And it goes from there. And I think all of that contributes to even the healthiest of people. It all contributes to feeling bad about yourself. And if you're already predisposed or having an unknown kind of depression or anxiety or bipolar or, the other illnesses, OCD, I mean, you feel even worse.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, Melissa, I feel like as, the CEO of a major toy company, you may have been, on the outside, one of those women that others would look at and be like, wow, she has it all. She's got 6 kids. Look, and the toys are amazing. Can we just take a minute to
Yes,
celebrate
we can.
those puzzles? Those puzzles are so,
Thank you.
the sushi, the wooden sushi set.
It's
all of it.
so
It's just amazing.
amazing.
I still don't forgive you for the giant unicorn because it was too big for a New York City apartment, but we won't dwell on that. But Melissa, when you talk about in your book, you really did have almost like a double life. You were designing all these joyful, whimsical toys, but at the same time, you were deeply, deeply depressed. Can you tell us a little bit about this dark time that you experienced and how you were able to pull yourself out of it?
Yeah, and it's interesting in that the toys were actually the first channel that allowed me to find some salvation from the despair. But I think prior to that, my comparison of myself was with society's ideal. And again, society from early on told me I had to be perfect, that there could be no chink in my armor, that I couldn't show any emotion other than shiny, bright, perfect. I couldn't show any weakness. I couldn't be tired. I couldn't be human. I couldn't give myself care, and I couldn't indulge myself in anything. And I basically fell into that martyr, server, pleaser role from the outset of my life. And it didn't change until literally a few years ago. So because I still had all those feelings, because I am a highly sensitive person with a full range of emotion, and I couldn't show them because society told me that would be imperfect, that would not be good, I basically denied, repressed, and disassociated from every single negative feeling I ever felt and put on this facade of perfection.
And did you have, moments where you just had to break down? I just can't imagine being someone, just
The exhaustion.
without the exhaustion. You have 6 kids, you have this, it's got to be a high pressure job, right? With this massive company. How did you hold it together? Did you ever have moments where you had to sneak out of the boardroom and go to the bathroom stall and lose it for a few minutes? Or did you just have this armor on all the time?
It was my battle cry. I was the martyr that would fight through it all with a smile on my face, and it was my validation, checking off every box and making sure sort of everyone was happy. And I didn't know any differently. I wasn't thinking I'm living this life. That was my life, the only life I knew. However, it does pain, which I was feeling, plus resistance, which I was doing, equals massive suffering, which I was feeling. And ultimately, in my late 40s, the dam that was repressing all that emotion started getting cracks in it. And I did ultimately crack because you can't. And now I know that's what leads to a midlife crisis, because I denied everything I was and everything I felt my whole life. And ultimately sort of the wall came crashing down. And I needed to finally, admit I wasn't perfect, admit I needed professional help, and take this journey inward to finally accept that I'm a full spectrum of emotion. And I am a deeply sensitive, highly creative, weird, misfit, creative person.
So, I feel like we hear a lot about the word, normalize conversations about body image, normalize, not turning on your camera on Zoom. And now we're talking about normalizing these conversations about mental health. So, Dr. Birndorf, what does that look like exactly? More people talking?
Yeah, what Melissa just said. It looks like that. It looks like acknowledging reality when you get to it. So I just have such deep sadness for your previous self that was so defended and so distant from your own internal self, right? The external and the internal were not related. And that just makes me feel pain. As a psychiatrist, I just think to myself, oh my,
where were you when I needed you?
It's so funny you say that, because there are women, I've met so many. We treat at the Motherhood Center, we treat a lot of really type A, really high powered, women who are doing it all. And And they often come in when they're where there are cracks in the dam, but also sometimes they come in, right, like having a kid pushes you over that edge. I mean, you got through 6 and, but I think that at some time kids will be that moment where you will have to look at yourself in a different way. There's always a moment or a series of moments that leads to I can't do this anymore. I'm so curious. And obviously you say what that was for you, Melissa, because I think that, for most people, they'll go as far as they can. And then unless, I'll say to them, it can't be that people are still very defended. I guess what I'm trying to say, a long way to say, I meet people like your former self and I'll say, it can't, tell me more, tell me what the feeling is. And sometimes they can't name a feeling and other times they won't, or they just don't have the language for it, or they're not connected to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm so curious what you'd say to your former self.
And I also want to just add to that, Melissa, when your former self, do you, looking back now, feel like this armor, that you put on and this kind of drive to be this martyr in a weird kind of way was what helped you be so successful at the business? Because I feel like, it's really impossible. I don't know how anybody can have 6 kids and run a huge company and do it all. And, we know that there's this myth of trying to do it all. Do you think that looking back, you're like, yeah, I had it all, but I was, it backfired?
Yeah, it was absolutely. I anchored to achievement as my form of validation because I didn't feel validated for who I was. So I disassociated from all the qualities that actually gave me the ability to create, ironically, and really anchored to, I'm going to prove to the world that I can be accepted through my achievements. And that included having 6 children, 6 C-sections, no less. Because it was the strong me that's going to push through the pain, literally. And, but ultimately it's nothing to be proud of because I wasn't, I was looking outside myself for validation in external, baubles. And inside I was still empty because I had never discovered and accepted who I was. So I was utterly bereft inside, even though, I have an amazing husband, like my partner of 30 years, like everything was really fine on the outside. It wasn't fine in me. It was all because of me, not the circumstances.
I just got to ask if you had a holiday card with all the 6 children where everyone looked perfect. I feel like.
So that I didn't do because I didn't believe in that. And I've always been one, I'm not wearing makeup now. I've always been one that said, I'm going to do the most I can do. And I'm going to fight for the, finish line. I'll crawl across it, but I'm not going to put out something that isn't true. And, I make classic toys, they're no frills. They're very simple. So I've always believed in my creations, in pure authenticity, which is really funny because, right, I was hiding anything authentic in my feeling.
That's really interesting.
That's
I always get the holiday cards and I sift through. I'm like, yep, divorcing. Yep, crying on the pillow at night. Yep, no, that's Botox. Yeah. This is what we do, right? So I respect that you didn't go over I was like, if she's got 6 children, first of all, getting them all to look at the camera, forget it. It's not happening, right? So Dr. Birndorf, tell us, are the feelings that Melissa has described, is that something that you see with the women at the Motherhood Center?
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that we saw in the video was that these are treatable conditions. So talk to us about the fact that this is all treatable and that we're not broken.
No, again, I hate to keep saying this, Melissa. I feel so sad for that self that was looking perfect, but feeling such despair because you didn't have to, right? You didn't have to. And okay, you get there when you get there, and that's just how it is. And there's beautifulness ahead. It can always be, it's never too late, right? For anybody, I don't care if you never addressed anything and you're 80, great, go to therapy. It's just never too late. But yes, people feel this way. And that's why I feel so fortunate. I've always done reproductive health within psychiatry. And I feel like the perinatal period is such this this poignant moment where you have a chance. I mean, first of all, you get hit at so many levels. So there are opportunities for people to crack, which I think is a good thing, because without it, they might just soldier on like you, or like you're one of the top examples now. I'm so glad to meet you. But you really are, you were so extremely powerfully pushing forward. But most people crack a little around, pregnancy, trying to conceive, fertility, and loss. I mean, it becomes too much for some, pregnancy can bring that on. Postpartum obviously can. And so what I love about my work is it's this moment of potential transformation where we say like, okay, like you're not broken. Like, thank God you like hit the wall, because now we can like step back and be real and be like, this sucks. And like, what are we doing? What are you doing? So why are you like just beating your head against a wall? And like, let's back up and really think about it and do it. I mean, you can't do that. Again, I'm sure your kids are awesome because you were so tightly closed off to it. And in a way, we all bank on those things. We trade on some of the things that aren't that great for us, right? I've always thought my anxiety, I'm an anxious person, and I feel like that fuels me. But like when it's too much, it's no good. Then I'm no good to anybody. But it's just an opportunity in the perinatal period to really catch people when they're falling and to say like, was it going okay? Is it okay? How can it be different? How can we help you look in and really look at some of the wounds that you've had? What was it like to be mothered? Did you have a mother who was present and available, or like most of us was complicated and, demanding perfection, or whatever there was, like whatever it was, like it's a moment to look. I'm gonna stop talking.
No,
Can
that's great. No,
I add one? Yeah. Can I add one thing too?
Sure.
One of the topics we've found the most resonance with is the topic of martyrdom. This idea of serving from an empty well. And I have spoken with, hundreds now of women are reaching out to us that say, oh my gosh, I never knew what it was, but I am a martyr. And basically, women especially, we fall into this role of caregiver, server, pleaser, mostly in our families. And a lot of it's dysfunctional families where to be seen, to be accepted and validated, we serve. And then what we end up doing is we never put ourselves on the list, right? We're not even on the self-care list. And we end up serving to such an extent that we go into our middle age bitter, and we don't even realize it. Like, it was my blind spot because I thought I was selfless, but I was really a martyr, meaning I was getting so bitter and resentful that nobody seemed to serve me. I was only doing the serving. And in the end, when you're a martyr, you don't serve yourself because you're serving from an empty well and you're depleted and you're exhausted and you're bitter. And you don't serve anyone else either because you're disabling them from gaining the skills necessary to become independent, competent people themselves. So that's where in my book, my lowest point is when I realized with horror that I was angry, bitter, resentful, and bereft, and they were not thinking I was mom of the year. In fact, they were angry I wasn't giving them even more. And they were unable to serve themselves and become independent. So my selflessness was actually selfish.
Well, and right now in the pandemic, we're asking women to be teachers. We're asking them to work full time. Now that everyone's home, Lord, how many times do I empty the dishwasher in a day? It's like 3 times the normal, traffic of eating and drinking and mess and laundry and all of that stuff. It's just piles up. And to your point, the more you do it for everyone else, we all just kind of fall into that routine, and then you're in this martyr cycle, and it's hard to break both for yourself and for those that are around us, right? And I think a little bit, especially even in the business world before the pandemic, it's kind of glorified in our society to be the last one in the office, to be, the one who's, I had a call the other day with a woman who had a 3-month-old baby, and she's like, oh yeah, my baby's just out with the nanny. And I was like, wait, but your baby's 3 months old? Like, that's really hard. Like, are you just back to work? She's like, no, I've been working this whole time. And I was like, this is not okay. Like, what is going on here? I really think, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up because we need permission to kind of own that cycle, wouldn't you say?
I would say whatever works for you authentically, right? Like for that person, maybe being back to work was important for whatever reason. It might be for the wrong reason, well, whatever that means. But it's really like understanding yourself, right? So it's hard to, it's easy to judge, but it's hard to find the authentic, and to be comfortable with what you're doing, well, you're breastfeeding and I'm not. And that's cool. That's just how it is. So there is a lot of permission that's needed for many of the different things we do in motherhood that are dissimilar to others. But if you don't mind, I want to go back to one thing Melissa had said about the emptiness of martyrdom, the empty giving and the self, how in the end, I think that's such a beautiful twist of selfish, how selfless turns to selfish. And it takes you back to Winnicott. Donald Winnicott was a famous pediatrician and analyst from who said in the mid 1900s, 1950, wasn't that long ago, about good enough mothering, right? And the good enough mother is not the mother, right? Everyone thinks good enough is bad. And I like to say good enough is great. Good enough is the goal. And it's the goal because if you satiate every need, if you meet every need because you're the martyr mother, they don't learn they don't learn tolerance, distress tolerance. They don't learn how to take care of themselves. They don't learn disappointment. I mean, we're breeding snowflakes. We're breeding teacups who can't take care of themselves, who can't do anything for themselves. And in the end, they should be mad at us if that's what we're doing because we've handicapped them. And Winnicott was so brilliant in his good enough mothering that a lot of people really shy away from because they don't like if I can have great, why would I go for good enough? But good enough is actually the goal because it's saying that you both have self and other, it's not, I do for you alone and I satisfy and meet every need of yours because that's best for you. That's not best for you. And it's not best for the mom.
100%.
I love that. And that is when you do great mothering, it's about you, not about what's best for your kids. And that's what I realized with shock was, oh my goodness, this was only for my validation, not for building resilient children. It was horrible. When you realize that, it's very disappointing because you didn't serve yourself either.
Dr. Birndorf, you talked about this kind of perinatal phase of life as like an opportunity almost to recognize when a woman comes to you, they may have just hit the wall. What about getting ready to see the wall before you hit it? So I'm just thinking back now to I had 2 kids. I don't think any doctor ever asked me about anything related to mental health. They do all the tests, the blood work, they weigh you, they measure the belly, they do all that stuff, but there were no questions about, how are you feeling? What's going through your head? Is this something that, is there a movement now to make that more part of exams?
So. I mean, when I started doing this in the mid 90s, I felt very much alone being interested in this. I came from, being very interested in reproductive rights and got into mental health, which I think I was always destined for, and wanted to merge, women's health. I didn't know if I should be an OB or a psychiatrist, so I merged them. But I had to get my own education. Nobody was doing it. I was at Cornell. It was like I would ask people, "Oh, is there postpartum depression here?" They're like, "What? What is that?" What? No, we don't. And I would go to the OBs and I'd say, "Do any of your patients have this?" They'd be like, "No." And you know what? And not all of them, but there was definitely. It was really, I felt like the Grim Reaper. I would say, could I come speak to like the new moms or the expecting parents? Could I come into those classes? And I remember one of the nurses who ran the program at New York Hospital said to me, like, just please don't bum people. Like, I don't know what you're going to say. Like they were watching to make sure I wasn't going to really depress people. And
really
it was
scary.
Isn't that talking about scary? It's like, wait, because we tell the truth, because we're talking about reality, because we're talking about what could happen and that the baby blues happen to almost everybody. And you're the unusual person if you don't have sort of mood lability and swings right after you have a baby and think you're losing your mind, but you're not. And then if that goes on, you could be moving into postpartum depression. And much of that starts, the majority of that may have started during pregnancy. Oh, and it may have started years ago because you were a depressed person who never got treated. So, but I felt unable, unallowed to say that. And so when I tell you, when I started the program at Cornell in the early 2000s, I felt like I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. I'm going to teach this. And I'm going to stand on the shoulders of my mentors, the few people who had done this before me. And we're going to make this, we're going to scream about it. And there wasn't a lot of research. There were 6 seminal articles. Now there are tens of thousands of articles written about all we're talking about. You have this whole thing is about it, right? This is blows my mind sometimes when I think about how far we've come. And yet we're still not talking enough about it.
We're still not talking about it. I mean, Melissa, one of the things that you wrote about in your book, Lifelines, was this whole notion of secrecy and about how women will do whatever they can to keep this secret and bury it, and never let it out because of fear of shame and fear of judgment and fear of all of these things. So, what was it in your mind that was keeping you for so long from telling anybody about this?
That's a great question. I mean, the few times that I let it leak out, people didn't want to hear it. It's exactly what Catherine just said. People said to me, first of all, they looked at me with shock and horror, what? You of all people? So they made me feel like something was really wrong with me. And of course, when you're a perfectionist, if someone says something's wrong with you, you're like, oh, no, I'm actually fine. I'm fine. And that's what I would do. I'd say, oh, forget it. It wasn't anything. And then you vow to never tell anyone again. So I think, this mental health crisis and stigma is twofold. One, more of us have to come out and say, we're afflicted and look at us. We can still lead bountiful lives and be afflicted. But two, and maybe even more importantly, society has to learn how to answer people when they say, I'm really, really sad today and I'm not sure what to do. Or I have depression because, I get one of 3 things. I either get people to look at me still in horror, like I'm contagious, and kind of quickly run away. The second is I get people to say, I'm so sorry. And they say, I'm so sorry. And they kind of awkwardly pat my shoulder. And again, when someone says they're sorry, it means they pity you, which means that something's wrong because they're sorry for me. And I'm not saying it for them to be sorry for me. I'm just telling them who I am at this point. And then the third is they come over and they're like, woohoo, you and I both, baby, let's kick this stigma, out of the house together. So I think, but nobody knows, we haven't had enough conversation around how do you respond to people who talk about their mental afflictions. And I think until we do, people I am still going to feel really reticent to tell folks how I truly feel.
And Dr. Birndorf, help us with some of that language because, Melissa has a couple examples in the book where she opened up to a friend and they were like, oh, you're fine, get over it type of thing. Yeah. Brush it off. What is the response that we should be, kind of thinking about as that friend who hears from one of their own friends that they're struggling? What is the language that we should be responding with that is more welcoming, that is not like, oh, I feel sorry for you, but what can we say? Tell us in your professional opinion how to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question. And I think it's really hard to find the right balance. You don't want someone to feel pitied. You want them to feel seen and heard. And you just really, what you really need to do is listen, is to say, tell me more, it's just like, how are you? Wow. Tell me, talk to me. I love you. Tell me what you're feeling. It's really the curiosity if I had to sum it up, it's to be curious and to not shut someone down or to invalidate what the feelings are, but to just say, well, I would never have known, in a million years, please tell me, did I miss, these people start to feel guilty. Did I miss this? Was I not open to you? I mean, that's, I think, a reasonable response, but it's really complicated. And sometimes when I tell my kids how they should respond to their friends, they're like, we don't talk like that. That's very find some better language. So I don't mean that my language should be everybody else's language, but some version of, wow, how are you? Like, how are you doing? And I say that on the other side too, like before, I'll often say when people are like, well, I'm not you, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know what to do. I don't know the questions to ask. You don't have to know anything. Yeah. All you have to be able to do is look somebody in the eye and say to them, how are you? And not move. Yeah. And don't get social and be like, oh, how are you? It's how are you? And you sort of weirdly
and I think from my perspective, being someone who received that response many times, I think what I would want to see and what I now do for others is you don't look at them any differently. You don't show any shock. You say to them, I hold their hand, maybe sometimes metaphorically now on Zoom, and say, I am here for you and I'm not going anywhere. And I want you to tell me all about it. And I'm here to support you however I can, because that's what I wanted someone to say to me. And nobody ever did. So I should say my husband always did, but when I was little and those, when I was in those situations, but of course I realize now that there were people who would support me, but certainly not when I was young and I was terrified to show those feelings.
And Dr. Birndorf, you mentioned like the example of your kids. Well, we don't talk like that. And I feel like, especially now in the pandemic, we don't talk as much as we used to in person. It's texting or it's, no one phones anymore. So you can't look them in the eye necessarily, or you can't hear that little dip in the person's voice that might tip you off to something's off with my friend. So again, I'm just looking for tips. Like if you text a friend, hey, how are you? Right. And they say, fine. What's the follow-up to dig a little deeper? If we know that, so many people are hiding, so many people are feeling this wall that they've built up. How do you just dig a little deeper beyond the fine to get down to what's going on?
Well, if you can't look them in the eye, or if you can't, hear it on the phone. I mean, I still make phone calls, and all my closest friends will say, what's wrong? The minute my voice sounds slightly different, we all have that. So the phone works pretty well for those who know you to sort of call you out when you sound like, but it's funny because even my really good friends know it in text when my texts are a little because it comes through. But to your question, I think if you're worried about someone, you say it. I think, and you say to them, I mean, I can tell when I haven't heard from somebody for a few days and I'm in regular contact with them, or if someone sort of falls off the radar, I'll write to them and say, hey, I haven't heard from you. How are you? Oh, fine. Whatever the answer is, again, with just words. I might say, really? Question mark. I feel like you've been kind of MIA. Where have you been? Like I might go a little further to kind of see if I can ask a few like questions to kind of get in there to see if they're willing to come forward. But you can't make someone who's not ready talk. And, I'll sometimes, say to people, I'm worried about you. I have not seen you, or I am just having a feeling that you've not, I haven't been able to get a hold of you. I feel like you might be avoiding me. What's going on? What's happening? I just think directness in sort of an eye, with the I statements, I'm worried about you. What's going on? But Melissa, you can answer this probably better than I about what you would have wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just knowing that people aren't judging you or thinking something's wrong with you or seeing you any differently, that they want to just understand you so they can support you more wholeheartedly.
Well, we have a ton of questions coming in right now from our live audience. So I want to go now to some of those questions. So here's one. During this pandemic, it's been extremely hard to prioritize better and figure out where and what to say no to. There is such an extreme amount of pressure. How can moms balance it all better? Dr. Birndorf, what do you think?
Well, going back to the very first question you asked, why are people so stressed and struggling? I said isolation. I intended to, and I never did, follow up with multitasking, the fact that women are now cooking, cleaning, working, teaching. I mean, how many more jobs can you have at once at home? And it's making us, multitasking was never good for us, and women are excellent at it. So how do you say no? I mean, you really have to decide. I think in quiet moments, not in the middle of something or in a rage or in the heat of the moment, is to think about like what matters to you. Where do you need, what are your values? If you're sitting quietly and think to yourself, what matters and what doesn't? Like, where are you going to say, I'm so sorry, I can't do it. No, it doesn't work. And women, much like Melissa's described, are not good at saying no. So it's really painful, but no, I didn't make this up. No is a full sentence, right? No.
No is a full sentence. I like that. So Melissa, now you have this, you still have the Melissa and Doug Toy Company, and now you have a whole nother initiative. Are you saying no more often? Are you more kind of protective and, thinking about, okay, if I take on too much, I'm going to kind of go back to those old patterns? How do you manage it with some level of balance?
It's a great question. We had a workshop last night on what we call the feudal race, which is incessant activity to drown out the sound of sort of our own mortality. And I have been engaged in the feudal race my entire life, like constant activity, whether it mattered or not, to again feel validated. So we talked about the antidote, and it's really what Catherine said. It's to write down every single thing you're doing and to start to think, is that something I'm doing for my head, for the checking off the box, or is that something that truly brings me in my heart and makes me feel a sense of meaning and purpose? And sometimes it's hard to, I have a hard time sometimes. I'm like, I think that's in my head, but it might be in my heart. But you can pretty easily start to separate them. And there are also then the things you have to do, which may be in your head, but like you have to cook meals and work and do those things. So I think the more of the things that really don't matter and you're just doing them because someone asks you, those are the ones you really have to get off the list. And I've always done a pretty good job at that, because I know that, if I tried to be head of the PTA, like I wouldn't have ever been able to support my family, and I wouldn't have been able to spend time with my family.
I just want to say, if anyone from my kids' school is listening, that is why I never volunteer to be the mom, the class mom. I will never be able to send out the emails on the right day. Like, I know It's too much. So I'm saying no. Complete sentence.
I never did either.
Me either. And we went to a preschool in New York where it was all the residents. It was at the hospital. And we did 3 of us split class mom or class parent one year. It took 3 doctors to be one class mom, because we were all working full time, and we're like, okay, someone has to do it. So
someone has to do it. Oh my goodness. Well, okay. So here's now some questions in thinking about the solutions for folks who do recognize that they need some support. We have 2 kind of related questions. How do you get help? Where do you begin? And how do you find a therapist who specializes in postpartum? Dr. Birndorf, what do you think?
First of all, to know you have a problem is step 1. And Melissa is exhibit A. Like, if you don't know you have a problem, you're not asking for help, or you're just not connected to it. So first and foremost, to whoever asked the question, if you know you have a problem, if you know something, I would say you don't have to know what it is. You just have to know something's not right. And if something's not right and you are able, and again, you aren't always, it might not be the right time, or you might not have the room to break down, then all feelings are legitimate. They are legitimate. I don't care what anyone tells you. If you feel it, it is unique to you, and it is your experience, and it's legit, period. No one else may believe it. So, but trust yourself. And if you go around and tell somebody you're not okay, I don't feel right, and you keep getting the same answer, you keep going. And again, that's hard to do when you're depressed or anxious, or you don't believe in yourself that you are having legitimate feelings. But I was never give up. You will find someone who will listen. And if it's not this person or this doctor or that nurse or whoever it is, like, don't give up. Or find someone who will go with you and go on your journey with you, who will do it with you and say like, and have an advocate. My mind's going in so many directions here, but you know, sometimes you need an advocate because you can't do it for yourself. But if you know something's wrong. And then you go and get help and figure it out, and don't give up until you are convinced that someone is with you on the right track. So how do you get mental health care? It's not easy. So I just want to be straight up. You know, I live in New York City. I have been here for the past 25, 30 years, and it's still hard for people they're like, oh, how do I even get to it's hard insurance wise, money wise. How do you even find phone numbers? Oh, everyone's full. Oh, you don't specialize in that? I mean, the list goes on. It's really hard. So I feel for everybody who's not kind of on the inside, where people call me all the time. Tonight I have to return multiple texts. Oh, can you give me a referral? Can you tell me who to go see on this? I mean, and that's why Postpartum Support International, PSI, it's postpartum.net. And I've been on the board over the years, and now I'm on the advisory council, is one of the most important resources out there. They will connect you to local help. So we can help you at the Motherhood Center, and especially in the virtual world, because now we have people calling in from all over the world, but we will connect you, because that is so important to help somebody find help. And then it has to be a good enough fit, right? Like there's so many things that come after that, but like, if you can just get connected or find a service like Postpartum Support International, again, you can be anywhere in the world and they will have people who can connect you, because that is why it started, to support women who are struggling, women and families struggling around pregnancy and birth, to get them to help.
And Melissa, your initiative, Lifelines, is now providing, you know, something that might be a companion to the type of help that Dr. Birndorf is talking about, where you offer some peer-to-peer and more community-based support, where you're talking to one another. So tell us a little bit about how that works and how someone who might be interested could get involved.
Yeah, you know, we are not professionals, and I think in a way that's wonderful, because we're all a bunch of soulful, open, accepting people who share our experiences brutally honestly. And I think I've seen already, we've found incredible communion through doing that. So we're basically showing anyone who wants to come to us, it's a free community. Doug and I, we've been so fortunate over the 32 years we've had Melissa and Doug, and we decided that this is our passion project. We want to fuel our resources into this and help people to, one, not feel alone, so that those who are isolated, those who feel that no one understands them, that they'll never belong, can come to us and we'll welcome them with open arms. Two, that we all have the capacity to channel our darkness into light and find meaning. We really believe that everybody has these beautiful sparks of self-expression in their soul that long to rage freely and unite a bonfire with humanity. And we can't do it for you, but we can shine the light on how you can unearth your sparks. And then we also have this really cool journey, because for me, I was racing outside myself my entire life, looking for validation in achievement and all kinds of things. And it wasn't until I finally had the courage to stop racing, take a deep breath, and journey inward to accept myself in totality that I finally found peace and fulfillment. So that journey is a free journey, the same journey I took, that we offer as the centerpiece of our ecosystem, and anybody can take as well.
That's wonderful.
So
And that's
cool.
all that's all
Thanks.
Virtual right now, right, Melissa? It's all
online.
virtual.
And we have a lot of Zoom, almost every day we have a Zoom workshop. And we talk about these really deep topics that no one talks about, you know, like martyrdom and perfectionism and the feudal race.
Love that.
Yeah, lots of cool topics. And we're adding more every day based on the many letters we receive.
Okay, so check out Lifelines, check out all of the virtual groups that they offer, and as well, Postpartum Support International. Did I get that right?
Postpartum.net. And also we have at the Motherhood Center, we have all the resources on the motherhoodcenter.com. I'll be in big trouble if I don't mention that. But so we've got those resources, and we tell you to go to postpartum, but we've also got lots of groups and different webinars and things that are psychoeducational, but also groups for new moms. And we really try to make it like real talk. Like we're not we're not sitting around, you know.
No one's got time for fluff in a pandemic, right?
No fluff.
So we're getting to the brass tacks here. We're getting down to the meat of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's that's one thing I always love when you have to deal with a busy mom. It's like, okay, let's just like get down to business. Like I'll call a friend. I have 5 minutes. Go.
Right.
Tell me what's happening. Okay. One more question here from the audience. I go on social media a lot because it's one of my forms of socialization right now. But my friends make me feel awful in how they represent themselves online. How do I come to terms with continuing my friendship with them, but also feeling jealous and down on myself for not being as perfect? Woo, there's a lot going on there.
Melissa? No. Well, let me give you, I'm going to back up and give you a framework to think about that. There are no absolutes. It's not black or white, right? It's not all or nothing. It's not, and another way to say that, it's not either or, it's both and. So you can socialize and feel jealous. I'm not saying that's great and it's not making this person feel so good and I'm sorry. So maybe you want to do a little less of it or find different ways to socialize, but both things can be true. So it can be good and bad, right? Like you're enjoying the socialization of it. So I want you to understand that the complicatedness of the feeling that you're describing in that question so beautifully, that both things are true. At the same time, you can love and hate, you can feel happy and sad all at the same time. So I know I didn't answer the question because I think that's a very hard question to answer. I think you have to figure out for yourself if you need to spend less time on social media or if you need to sort of talk with your friends about it, or find someone to confide in to sort of say, I'm struggling in these ways, or if you're feeling jealous, what's happening for me that I might want to do something different in my life? Is that a signal from within that is saying I might try something else? It's complicated though, if that really is the place where you do socializing.
And that makes me think a little bit about something in Melissa's book, in that you devote a lot of time, and the photography in your book is incredible, by the way. But you talk about nature as one of the few places that you were able to feel a release and to be able to feel some joy. And so given that we're all online all day, working over Zoom, texting, as opposed to meeting in person, I'm curious, Melissa, from your experiences, what nature was able to provide for you. And then also Dr. Birndorf, scientifically, I know there's a lot of research to show that this can just boost our mood just sitting next to a tree. So Melissa, tell us about, what you wrote about in the book with respect to nature.
Yeah, I mean, nature truly lifts my vibrational frequency. I truly feel myself. I can be in a somewhat low place and go out in nature and actually feel my soul elevate to match that of the nature around me. So nature is one of my lifelines, my essential lifelines. And every single day, no matter what else is going on, I make 1 hour to be in nature. And it doesn't matter. That's the first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning, because if I don't do it, I truly start to dip below the line. And, I feel at my point in life, anything that takes me out of my heart and in my head, I disengage from. So like for me, if I was going on social media and it was making me feel really bad about myself, I would say to my friends, like, I want to be friends with you, but we got to figure out another way to do it, because this social media thing is making me feel bad. And that's what I did with news. It's what I do with people in my life who just make me feel not good about myself. I pretty much said, you know what? I can't have this in my life because I'm not strong enough to be able to have them in my life. So in this place where I'm not strong enough to truly do it in a way I can have both, right now I have to choose myself and choose just me. So I think until you can do both and not have those ugly feelings, like I would choose yourself and choose to and blame it on yourself. I just can't. I'm at a point in my life where I can't handle it right now. And then go out in nature, spend that time you're on social media and go out and stare at the stars or feel the sunlight on your face or breathe in that beautiful air and raise your vibrational frequency.
Does the science back that up, Dr. Birndorf? What are you going to tell us? We're almost out of time, but I want to just know from you.
The science does. I mean, there are many things that seem like they aren't science or medicine, but let me put sleep at the top of that list, right? Sleep is medicine. being out in nature is medicinal. There are many things that we all have to do. Eat healthily, not crazily, but just eat smartly and take care of yourself in a way that makes you feel good. All those things will help your mental and physical health. But nature is I don't know that it's so underrated, but I think that if you can't, I literally have to pull myself out of here because I could just work all day long. I had to take a walk before we came on this call tonight because I said, if I don't go out, I'm going to be miserable having not seen the sunshine today. Just get out, just walk outside. So you kind of sometimes have to force yourself. I love your hour a day. I go with anything is better than nothing. So if I only have 5 minutes, I go for 5 minutes. Like, you don't have to start big, just start small, whatever you can get in there. Do it.
This is a perfect segue to our next event, which will be on April 20th as a lead up to Earth Day, where we will be talking about why climate change is a parenting issue. So this is something that all of us play a role in. And, we've just heard about all the incredible mental health benefits of being in nature, and we all need to do our part to be part of the solutions. So you can register for that event at scarymommy.com/live.work.thrive. So I want to thank both of you. This has just been an incredible panel. I feel like we could have talked for another hour about this topic because there's so much, to dive into. So thank you, Melissa Bernstein. Look for her new book, Lifelines. Visit lifelines.com for mental health support, guidance, and community. And also Dr. Birndorf, thank you for being here. Visit themotherhoodcenter.com for help or to attend some of their upcoming events virtually in May, which is also Maternal Health Awareness Month.
Right.
They have an incredible series of panels, including experts and survivors. I was looking at the site earlier and it looks really phenomenal. So check that out.
Thank you.
So have a great night, everyone watching. We've been through the ringer this year and, the rest of the year that we're already in, but we are stronger together. So check on your mom friends, your sisters, your colleagues. Ask them how they're doing, like the doctor has mentioned, and like Melissa suggested, just ask and have that curiosity. I think that's a first step we can all take tomorrow. And if you need a lifeline, we hope some of the information shared here tonight might work for you. We will get through this because we are moms and we know how to live, work, and thrive. Good night.